Working as the Post and Courier's Clemson reporter, I get to cover some of the top teams in the nation. One of the things that makes my job really interesting is being able to be at the facility, talking to the players, getting to learn their stories. With a subscription to the Tiger Take, you'll not only get to read everything I write on postandcourier.com, but you'll also get the latest updates straight to your inbox. But more than that, you'll get insights that you won't find anywhere else.
Hi, this is Gene Sapakoff, sports columnist and college sports editor for the Charleston Post and Courier, welcoming you to another edition of Countdown to Kickoff, where we talk each week with Clemson beat reporter Jon Blau. And if you want some of John's really cool inside takes about college football and other fun stuff, check out postandcourier.com/thetigertake. That's postandcourier.com/thetigertake. And John, kind of a weird game last week with Clemson against Furman, where you beat the Purple Paladins, but do not outgain Furman. Wow. Kind of a mad, perturbed Dabo Swinney, too. It is Tuesday press conference. What do you make of that, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think I, in the newsletter, called it bizzaro world of sorts for Clemson, just because if you had that DJ Uyunglele would have a great game, defense would be absolutely terrible. And, again, that the Furman would outgain Clemson at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think those are three things that people would have really guessed going in. And like you said in the Tuesday press conference, Dabo Swinney said that the defense basically didn't show up, and they stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn. They never made it to Memorial Stadium. They were there physically, but not there mentally, not there in terms of the effort you need to have. It was just a very weird game, and I don't know what to make of it, because you do think about there was 5 days rest coming off the Georgia Tech game. It is Furman, so maybe you overlook them a little bit. But because of that performance, I think because of some of the words Dabo Swinney said, I would think that Clemson is not going to be in position to overlook Louisiana Tech as they go into this second non-conference game.
It looks like Louisiana Tech isn't quite what they have been in the past. And so I think a lot of the focus this week is going to be on Clemson trying to get better. John, what do you make of DJ Uyunglele playing a pretty good game, but Cade Klubnik not exactly sticking out in his first game at Death Valley? Talk about the two QBs for the Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking last week about how these two non-conference games would be an opportunity for Cade Klubnik to get some playing time. It might bend the narrative in terms of maybe Cade's going to make a push. And that just basically died last week in terms of Cade Klubnik came out there, looked like a freshman, missed a wide open Antonio Williams down the field, ran out of bounds, just 1 of 4 passing for -2 yards, I think is where he finished. And DJ Uyunglele had another pretty good game. Again, it's against Furman. The pockets were very clean. And obviously there's mismatches in terms of his receivers against that secondary. But he played a much better game than he would have played last year, maybe even against a team like against South Carolina State or something like that. So he continues to make strides, and this is very much DJ's team going forward. And but again, it'll be interesting to see if there is a second chance for Cade Klubnik to come into the game and see if he learned from those mistakes against Furman, and maybe he can make a little bit of a conversation again. But right now, it's definitely DJ Uyunglele's team.
Thanks again for joining us for Countdown to Kickoff, the weekly talk with Jon Blau, Post and Courier beat reporter covering Clemson. And check out John's tremendous newsletter at postandcourier.com/thetigertake. John, let's talk about Clemson's receivers. Tiger fans, at least as they went to 6 straight college football playoffs and last year missed out with a 10-3 season, were kind of comfortable with some real go-to star receivers, Mike Williams, T. Higgins, and Justin Ross. Is there a guy in this wide receiver core that could be someone that other defensive coordinators say, we've got to account for this guy scares us, or is that guy not on this Clemson roster?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think yesterday Dabo Swinney was asked about the more quote-unquote experienced guys with Joe Ngata and E.J. Williams, and how they have to turn things around because they haven't been very present the first 2 games. But then Dabo Swinney said this is kind of a false notion that we have this experienced receiving core. I mean, Joe Ngata's been out a bazillion games. I mean, EJ Williams missed most of last season. It's just a group that doesn't really have a veteran standout guy. I mean, you can't really point to the group and say it's there, but honestly, I mean, I think if there are two guys that have a chance to be that, it's Bo Collins, obviously coming into his own as a sophomore. He had a really nice adjustment on a route last week. It was kind of supposed to be a slant. He ends up going to the corner and DJ drops it in the bucket. There's definitely a chemistry between DJ and Bo because they go back to high school at Bosco Prep out there on the West Coast. And I would say the other guys, honestly, I think Antonio Williams has looked really, really good these first two games, the true freshman from Dutch Fork High School. He's got another kind of shiftiness, different kind of gear to him that a lot of the receivers that Clemson's been bringing in, these big 6'3", 220-pound receivers don't quite have. And he seems to have a knack for getting open and making big plays. So it'll be interesting to watch Antonio Williams in these next few games to see if his role continues to grow and he have a kind of a rising young receiving core with Bo Collins and Antonio Williams.
John, let's discuss for just a few minutes here the offensive line and how they have played in the first couple of ball games for Clemson. That, I would say, is the position unit that was under the most scrutiny in the offseason. A lot of changes there. Blake Miller playing and Putnam playing a different position, Walker Parks playing a new position. Your thoughts so far on how that's gone the first couple of games?
It's definitely a work in progress. I mean, I think, like you said, mentioning all the guys who have shifted positions, Putnam, Parks, Blake Miller at right tackle. I mean, that's just bound to, that's kind of a recipe for not exactly being all together and in sync because these guys haven't had games together until the games we're watching right now. So there's been moments, especially in the Georgia Tech game, where pass protection was a little flawed. The run game probably took a step forward in the Furman game, but again, it's Furman, so you kind of have to see a larger sample size to really know. I think Jordan McFadden was talking this week and said, for the most part, we've been hitting our assignments. We've been kind of targeting the right guys, but there are moments where they're still kind of not exactly on the same page. So it's definitely, I would say, again, a work in progress on the offensive line. And it's a unit that really needs to come together. I think I wrote about it a couple times coming into the season. I mean, how much this offense is going to take a step forward really depends on how much they can lean on that running game and protect DJ Uyunglele, because like I said, when DJ has clean pockets, he has time to think and he can really get his feet set and throw the ball. He's got a great arm, but times when it's not clean, it becomes a little more dicey. So again, work in progress, but we'll see how it develops over these next few games.
Talking with Jon Blau, Post and Courier beat reporter. John, I know coaches hate it, absolutely hate it when we look ahead, but that's our job. So I just want to talk about generally the Clemson schedule. It kind of has gone up and down here in the last few weeks. The November 5th game in South Bend against Notre Dame suddenly does not look all that imposing after what the Thundering Herd went into South Bend and did last week. On the other hand, Sam Hartman's return to Wake Forest offense, they looked really good. I don't care if they were playing Vanderbilt or not. They just went in there and smashed the Commodores. And Clemson obviously has to play in Winston-Salem at noon on September 24th. And then we'll see about NC State this week, kind of a big game with Texas Tech. They barely got by, NC State did, at East Carolina. What do you think, just schedule-wise, looking ahead so far?
Yeah, like you said, that Wake Forest game is going to be interesting because, again, these two non-conference games, Furman, Louisiana Tech, obviously Furman was a little more adventurous than we thought it would be, but Wake Forest, really the beginning of the meat of that ACC schedule. I mean, that is the first kind of weighty opponent that Clemson's going to see. Obviously, last year it was a complete mismatch, and that's the interesting thing for me. As many points as Wake Forest is able to produce against these teams early in their schedule, with that, that slow mesh and some of the tricky things they do against Clemson, that thing does not seem to work just because they have so much size and talent in the front seven. Again, considering how bad the defense was last week for Clemson, that's why it'll be interesting to see how they show up against Louisiana Tech and build towards that game, because if the defense is as good as we think it's going to be for Clemson, I think it's going to be hard for Wake Forest to kind of win that matchup. But yeah, going ahead, like you said, NC State, that back-to-back right there with Wake Forest and NC State, that may define Clemson's season because, like you said, Notre Dame at the back end, are they really going to be a quality win at the end of it? We kind of have to see in terms of whether they recover or they continue to free fall after those first two losses to start the season. So yeah, it's a tricky slate for Clemson. It gets, again, that Louisville game right after Notre Dame. I mean, that was a close game last year. You got them coming right off of that. So it doesn't seem like Clemson's just going to glide through this thing, but it's going to be interesting to watch how Clemson plays, and then also just how their opponents kind of are rolling as we come into those games later in the season.
All right, John, it's that exciting time in countdown to kickoff when everyone is ready for the Jon Blau prediction for this week and a score for Clemson against Louisiana Tech at Death Valley on Saturday night.
Well, last week I said 52-0 for Furman. That was obviously way, way wrong. That's why I hate doing predictions. But let's say 30-13. Let's go with that. How about that? I just made that up right now. I hadn't really formulated it.
Well, that's what people come to Countdown to Kickoff for. Fresh thoughts from Jon Blau. And so, if you said 30-13, it'll probably be 52-0. But, we try our best. And I know that everybody that reads the Post and Courier and that follows Clemson football in any way would get a real treat by checking out Jon Blau's Post and Courier Clemson newsletter, which can be reached at postandcourier.com/thetigertake. For Jon Blau, I'm Gene Sapakoff, signing off on this edition of Countdown to Kickoff, and we will see you next week to talk about Clemson against Wake Forest.